Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Kaf Aleph in Maseches Avodah Zarah, 21. We are at the Mishnah on the last line of Kaf Amud Bet, 20b. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. We have been discussing, as we're getting ready now to, believe it or not, finish the first chapter of Maseches Avodah Zarah. We will do that, God willing, tomorrow. First chapter of Maseches Avodah Zarah. And so far we've addressed the times when we should not do business with idolaters, and certain items that we should not sell to idolaters, irrespective of the time. And we are up to the Mishnah on the final line of Kaf Amud Bet, and we pivot to discuss things that we should not even rent to idolaters. So let's take a look and see what the Gemara, what the Mishnah has to say. So, ein maskirin lahem batim be'eretz Yisrael. You should not even rent to an idolater a house in Israel. Ve'ein tzarach lomar sadot, and certainly not a field. So, ubisuria and Surya, and where is Surya? So Rashi tells us, gives us some additional details in connection with what's where Surya is and what its status is. So if we take a look at the last Rashi on the daf, Surya, Aram Tsova. It's a place called Aram Tsova, Usmocha Eretz Israel, and it's very close to the land of Israel. Of course, Surya is on some level what we refer to as Syria today. The Kivsha David, the Chibra LeKedushas Eretz Yisrael, and David Amelech, the King David, he captured it and joined it into the holiness of the land of Israel. Shelo al pi hadibur, but he did not do it through God's command, meaning he did not do it with the Urim v'Tumim, ubelow shishim ribu, and he didn't do it with an army of the entire nation. And so as a result of the Karile Kibush Yachid, and therefore we refer to this as the capturing or of one Jew. So it's not. It is therefore not going to be. It's a conquest of an individual, and therefore not a conquest of the entire community. And we are going to see that there is a debate as to whether or not that conquest is considered a valid conquest in terms of applying the laws of the land of Israel to that land that was captured in Syria. Mm-hmm. So what do we say about Syria as we turn to Kaf Aleph, Amud Aleph? Maskirin lahem batim aval lo sadot. So while the first opinion, which is Rebbe Meir, we haven't gotten to saying that these are divrei Rebbe Meir, but in any event, we're about to. According to the first opinion that we're seeing in the Mishnah, you can't do any kind of renting, and certainly not selling in the land of Israel to an idolater. But out in Syria, you could rent them a house, but not aval lo sadot, but not a field. And in Chutz La'aretz, mocher lahem batin umaskirin sadot. You're allowed to sell a house and you're allowed to rent fields. Divrei Rebbe Meir. That's Rebbe Meir's viewpoint. Again, no rental in Eretz Yisrael, rental just of houses in Syria, and you can rent anything in outside of Eretz Yisrael, and you can even sell houses but not fields. Okay, so Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Be'eretz Yisrael, maskirin lehem batim abalo sadot. Everything is going to be sort of like one level more lenient, according to Rabbi Yossi. In Eretz Yisrael, you can rent a house but not a field. B'Surya mokrin batim umaskirin sadot. You can sell houses and you can rent fields. And everywhere else, mochrin elu ve'elu, you can even sell it. So certainly you can also rent it. So, and now the Mishnah qualifies what it's told us so far. Even when they say that you can rent a home to an idolater, lo levei dira amru. We are not saying that you can rent it to for living there. You, as Rashi says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi on Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. Batim, where we say that you can rent out a house. Lola Beit Dira, we don't mean a house for living. Amru, well, that's not what we're talking about. But rather, it's for you to store there piles of grain or piles of things, vitivna and straw. So the point is you can you can rent them a storehouse. It's not where they can live. And why not go back into the Mishnah? We're again in the middle of the Mishnah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down. First line word on the line. Why can't we rent them a house to live in? He's going to bring his own idols in there. And Shneamar, and yet we have a pasuk that says, Lo toavi, lo tavi toiva el beitecha. You shouldn't bring an abomination into your house, and the house still belongs to you if you're renting it. So as a result, that's why when it comes to rental, you have to be very careful to whom you rent. You shouldn't rent it. It's a big question as to how do we rent today to people who are not Jewish or potentially idol worshippers. So there are a number of answers. Maybe they don't actually bring their idols. I mean, most people don't really have idols in that form. So as a result, in general, we do rent to people even irrespective of their religion. Okay, Mishnah continues. So, uv'chol makom, and everywhere, lo yaskir lo es hamerchatz, you can't rent a bathhouse. Why? Nikra al shmo, because it's going to be called after his name meaning the owner's name, the original owner's name. And so as a result, what is going to happen? Rashi tells us, Nikra al shmo. This is the Rashi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi on Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. V'haroa shemachamamin. And when they see that this person is warming up the water, b'Shabbos, on Shabbos, Omer, they're going to say, Shahabalanim, that the bath attendants, Shuluchin Shal Yisrael Hain, they are acting on behalf of the Jew, because everybody knows that the Jew owned it originally and he's just renting it out. And so as a result, you should not rent something to a non-Jew where people are going to think that as a result of your renting it to the non-Jew, that work is being done on your behalf on Shabbos. Exactly. Okay, so my ain't sarach lomer sadot. We said at the very first line of our Mishnah, as we now pick up with the Gemara, we said, and it goes without saying that when it comes to renting fields in Israel, that you don't do that. So why do we say that it goes without saying? Maybe because there are two sins. One is, and we saw this concept over the last few days, that you're not allowed to give a holding in the land to an idolater. And v'chada to come up mafka lamimaser. And then, of course, the second thing that you're going to do if you rent the field in Israel to somebody else is you're going to take it out of giving meiser. So as a result, there's no meiser and there's no and you're giving an idolater a holding of land. So that's two sins. But ihachi batim nami ikatarti, we could say that there are also two sins that you're doing with respect to, or two mitzvos that you're uprooting on some level with respect to renting a house, First, of course, is the dwelling, and you're enabling somebody who's an idol worshiper to dwell in that property. And then you don't have any mitzvah of mezuzah any longer if it's not your property. If you rent it to somebody else, you don't need to put up a mezuzah. So Amar Rav Masharshia, mezuzah chovas hadarhu. No, that you have to understand that it's not about who is considered like the owner, meaning is the renter considered like the owner, but rather it's about who's living there. And so as Rashi says, we'll take a look at Rashi, first Rashi on the Gemara. Chovas Hadar, who will look at the beginning of that Rashi, below Chovas Abayis. The obligation isn't on the house itself. Hilkach Leka Ifkata. Therefore, when you rent it to somebody, if I rent you something, but we haven't yet discussed who's going to live in the house, we haven't actually addressed the mitzvah of mezuzah at all. Because if I end up renting you the house and then I, let's say, hold over and rent from you, and pay you, I rent you the house for 5 years, but I need to live there for the first year. And I rent the house from you for the first of those 5 years. Well, or instead of renting it to me, you rent it to Mark, who's also a good Jewish guy. And so as a result, he's still going to have the mitzvah of mezuzah. So we don't know that if I were to rent it to an idolater, that it won't be subject to the mitzvah of mezuzah. You can't tell that just by knowing that I rented it. And so as a result, when it comes to renting a field, we know for sure that there are two mitzvahs that are not going to be fulfilled. One is that you're enabling an idolater to get a holding of the land. And the second is that you're going to be taking it out of the mitzvah of Meiser. So those two things are certainly true. Okay. So that is the basis for why we say that it's that when it comes to renting a house, Ein Sarach Lomer, you don't even need to say that certainly you're not able to rent a field in Israel. So Bisuria Maskirin. So now we're going to continue through each element of Rebbe Meir's opinion, and then we'll go through each element of Rebbe Yossi's opinion. Bisuria Maskirin Batim. In Syria, we're allowed to rent a house. So Maishna Machira Delo. So why is it that a selling is different, that we're not allowed to do it? Well, presumably, right, that's because, just going to scroll a little bit, Mishum Mechira de Eretz Yisrael. The reason that we can't sell in Syria is because we're worried that you're going to sell in Eretz Yisrael. Well, ihachi maskirus nami nigzor. Well, then why should we allow the renting of a house in Syria? Won't it result in us renting a house to an idolater in Eretz Yisrael? No, he gufa gzeira. No, you're misunderstanding. The prohibition of that we're saying that you're not allowed to rent a house is the following. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi explains, he gufa gzeira schirus atu machira, that the concern is renting will cause us to come and think about selling. Va'anan, right? That's the gzeira. Va'anan nekum v'nigzer gzeira l'gzeira. Well, what we're going to end up doing, we're going to end up doing is having a gzeira to gzeira. Well, 1 second, though, isn't this really the Gzeira itself? Ahaschiro sadeb de besuria de Gzeira l'gzeira he. Well, 1 second, right? Because here the Gzeira is the following. The Gzeira is that in Eretz Yisrael, you can't rent it. The law is that you can't sell it. But the Gzeira is that we don't want you to rent it in Eretz Yisrael. And so as a result, that's why we're not going to make the gzeira on renting a house in Syria, because renting a house in Syria is not the problem. The only issue would be renting a house in Eretz Yisrael, and we don't want to make a gzeira on a gzeira. But 1 second, we said that you're not allowed to rent a field in Syria to gzeira l'gzeira, but that would also but that would also be a decree against another decree, meaning the following. Again, the prohibition, the biblical prohibition, is selling a house in Eretz Yisrael or selling a field in Eretz Yisrael, and we said that you're not allowed to rent the house or rent the field in Eretz Yisrael because we're worried that you're going to come to sell the house. And so then when it comes to Syria, well, then we're going to, so we don't want to make a gzeira l'gzeira, and so that's why we don't have a prohibition on renting a house in in Syria. But 1 second, though, again, the Gemara asks, but what about renting a field? Isn't that Gzera? So no, Hasam Lav Gzerahu. No, it is not a double level of Gzera, because the concern about selling a field in Syria, Kasavar Kibush Yachid Shmei Kibush. Rebbe Meir holds that the conquest of an individual, namely David's conquest of Israel, of Syria, made it part of Israel. And so as a result, it's a biblical prohibition to sell a field in Syria. And therefore, we're only making one gzera. The gzera is we're not going to allow you to rent a field to somebody, to an idolater, because we're worried that you'll come to sell the field. And selling the field is biblically prohibited because of David's conquest. Well, Sadeh de Isbe Tarte Gazru Be Rabbanan. And so but now implicitly the Gemara asks, well, why then isn't renting a house in Syria also prohibited? Sadeh de Isbe Tarte. Well, that's because as we mentioned earlier, a field has two prohibitions. One is the fact that you enabled them to live there, enabled idolaters to live there, grab a holding of the land. And the second is that you're taking it out of Meiser. So in that situation, Gazru Bei Rabbanan, the rabbis issued a decree. And Batim delays Bo Tarti, but when it comes to houses, Lo Gazru Beho Rabbanan, the rabbis did not make a decree. And so as a result, even though when it came to the land of Israel, we do have a decree both with respect to conquest, both with respect to houses and with respect to fields. When it comes to Syria, we're only making that decree with respect to fields and not with respect to houses. So then the last position that we had of Rebbe Meir is for outside the places of Israel. And so, when it comes, what about where we say that you're allowed to sell a house, but you're not allowed to sell a field? So Sadeh, so why are we saying that why can't you sell a field? Sadeh, the Isbe Tarti, Gazru Bahu Rabbanan, Batam delays Bahu Tarti, Lo Gazru Rabbanan. So again, because there's a double prohibition with respect to fields, we are going to be extra strict and say outside the land of Israel, even outside the land of Israel, we're not going to let you sell a field because maybe you'll come to sell a field inside the land of Israel. But when it comes to a house, we won't have that concern because a house is a lesser prohibition. It only results in one prohibition. It does not do two. And so as a result, we're not going to make a decree there. All right, so we've now explained Rebbe Meir's position. Basically, it's where Syria is like Israel, and that's why you definitely can't do any kind of sales there. And we're always going to be somewhat stricter with respect to fields than we are with respect to houses because of this 2 versus 1 issue.
What's the one issue with the house?
Sorry, that there's the only concern with the house is that you're facilitating an idolater to have a holding in the land of Israel, and we don't want to allow that. But there is no second sin. Unlike when it comes to a field, you're uprooting the field from the mitzvah of Meiser. And you might say, well, 1 second, well, aren't you uprooting the house from the mitzvah of mezuzah? That was the opening question that the Gemara asked. And the answer to that question is no. The mitzvah of mezuzah is on the person who lives in the house, not the owner of the house. And so therefore, if just because you rented the house doesn't mean that the house is not going to be subject to the mitzvah of mezuzah any longer. So as a result, you are only taking it out of one mitzvah, not two. Okay? And so therefore, we're going to be stricter with respect to fields than we are with respect to houses. So now we're going to analyze Rebbe Yossi's view. So Rabbi Yossi Omer be'eretz Yisrael maskirin lahem batim. We do rent houses. We just don't rent fields. So my taima, What's the reasoning of Rabbi Yossi? So again, we have this in general. We see both with Rabbi Yossi and with Rabbi Meir a greater restriction, more restrictions with respect to fields than with respect to houses, and it's all based on the same principle. Sados de isbahu tarti. There are two sins with respect to fields. Gazru bahu rabbanan. So the rabbis made a decree. Batim delays bahu tarti. Lo gazru bahu rabbanan. So as a result, the rabbis did not make a decree, and so as a result, when it comes to a house in the land of Eretz Israel, you can go ahead and rent it. And of course, again, it's not renting to live there, but rather renting for them to store things there. Okay. Ubisuria mochrin. And when we said in Syria, you can sell a house and rent fields, but you can't sell a field. So my taima. So kasavar kibush yachid, lo shmei kibush. Again, Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Meir, and he says that the land in Syria is not considered like part of Israel. And so therefore, it is not a biblical prohibition to sell either a field or a house with in Syria. So then why do we prohibit the selling of a field, but not the selling of a house? V'sada de isba tarte gazru barabanan. So a field which has two sins with respect to it, so therefore they made a decree against selling the house, selling the field, excuse me. Batim delays tarte, but when it comes to homes, then they say where there isn't a second sin, lo gazru bahu rabbanan. The rabbis did not make a second decree. Okay, and then Rabbi Yossi said that we can sell houses outside the land and fields outside the land of Israel. So why are both of them being allowed? So my taima, Kevin Demirachik, lo gazrin, and because they're so far away, we're not going to make a decree. And so as a result, there's no decree with respect to selling even a field outside the land of Israel. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. So how do we paskin? Halakha kaRabbi Yossi. The halakha is like Rabbi Yossi. Amar Rav Yosef uvilvad shelo yasenu shchuna. But now it's not clear whether this applies everywhere or just in the land of Israel. But you cannot enable them to have a neighborhood of idol worshippers. So that is one issue. But kamashchuna, how much consists of a neighborhood? Well, how many people would you need to sell to or have to already be there in order for there to be a problem? So Tana, ein shchuna pchusa meshlosha b'nei adam. There's definitely not going to be an issue as long as you have fewer than three. V'lachosh dilma azol ha Yisrael mizabin lechad ovid kochavim v'azol heich so maybe we should be worried that somebody's going to sell it to Chris, the first guy, and Chris is going to sell it on to two other idol worshippers. And so why what's the story there? Don't we need to be worried about that? So Amar Abaye, alifnei mapkidan, alifnei dilifnei lo mapkidan. As we've seen previously, we have the prohibition of lifnei iver lo titein mechshol, that you should not put a stumbling block before a blind person. So the point is that it's only the immediate stumbling block. It's not the stumbling block before the stumbling block, meaning that there's no issue with respect to setting something up that could then set something else up that would enable the violation. So that's not going to be considered lifnei iver, and therefore that is why we're not going to be worried about it in this case. Okay, so then our Mishnah. So we've now explained all of the positions in our Mishnah, the machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir. We've said what the halacha is, and now we're going to go to the latter comments that our Mishnah mentioned. And the first of those latter comments was Afimakom she'amru lahaskir, even when we say that you can rent a home to an idol worshiper. So that means that you still can't do it for them to live there. Miklal, what's the implication of af b'makom? De'ika duchta delo mogre, that there is a place where you can't rent the idol to idol worshipers. And so as we turn to Kaf Aleph Amabet, Ustama Karebi Meir. So that implies that that at least on some level, this statement is true for Rebbe Meir, because Rebbe Meir is the only one who says that there are places where you can't rent a house. So it's true for Rebbe Meir. Now, in the end, we say that it's actually true also for Rebbe Yossi. But De'i Rebbe Yossi, B'kol Duchta Mokre, because if it was only being said for Rebbe Yossi, it would be true for anywhere. So we see that line also applies to Rebbe Meir. And the way that the Meforshim understand it is that means that it's everybody's agreeing to this line, meaning that even Rebbe Meir says that this line would apply. And the bottom line is that when you have to be careful when you rent, that you should rent, especially in the land of Israel, that if you're going to rent to somebody who is not Jewish, it's only for storage and not for living. Okay, so again, the Rishonim and Achronim all discuss, well, how do we deal with this today? Because a lot of people do seem to rent. Again, seems like one of the major answers is that the vast majority of people don't have idols, and so that's less of an issue. But in any event, it's something to talk about with your local Orthodox rabbi. Okay, ubakol makom lo yiskor. We said that no matter where you are, you should not rent a bathhouse. Okay, and so now we're going to quote a brisa that expands on that concept and explains to us why not, and it basically gives us the reason that Rashi mentioned. But since we are about to say it again, I won't repeat what Rashi said, and we'll get it again. So Tanya, we have a brisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Lo yiskar adam merchatzo laovdei kochavim." You should not rent your bathhouse to an idol worshiper. Mibnei shenikra al shmo, because it's still going to be called after your name. Va'ovei kochavim zeh osebo malacha b'shabbasos uv'yamim tovim. And this idol worshiper is going to do work on it on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And so, by the way, the clear implication of this is sometimes Oved Kochavim clearly means only an idol worshiper, and sometimes it means anybody who's not Jewish. Here is one of the cases where it certainly seems to mean somebody who is not Jewish. So, avalakuti mai. Well, 1 second. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says you can't sell it to an idol worshiper, but what would be the law with respect to a kuti? A reminder that the kutim were somebody who were gerei arayos. They converted because of lions who came, and the question is that a valid conversion or not? But bottom line is shara, and then in the end they end up observing just the written mitzvot that are in the Torah and not the mitzvot that are detailed through the Gemara, through the Mishnah and the Gemara. So Shari, the implication is because it only referenced an idol worshiper, it would be permitted. Well, kuti Amar Avid Bey Malacha B'cholosh Moed. Well, 1 second, don't we need to be worried? We don't have to worry about a kuti violating Shabbos or Yom Tov, because those are prohibitions that are said in the Torah, and so they agree with those prohibitions. But what about the prohibitions of working on Chol HaMoed? That isn't so clear in the Torah, and so as a result, they will do work on Chol HaMoed. Well, B'cholosh Moed, we do some work on Chol HaMoed as well. And specifically, the work that would be associated with running a bathhouse is work that would be permitted on Chol HaMoed. So that's why we're going to say you can rent it to a kuti, but you cannot rent it to a idol worshiper. Aval sadehu la'ovid kochavim mai. So 1 second, what about a field to an idol worshiper? Share, then it would be permitted. My taima, why would it be permitted? Arisa, arisuse, ka'avid. Well, it's clear that, and we know that when people are working on a field, often they are sharecroppers. And so as a result, nobody's going to say that Chris, the non-Jew, who's working in your field, is actually doing the work for you, they'll all understand that Chris is a sharecropper. He's got control of the field, and he is working for himself. The fact that you may benefit from it is a side thing and not actually something that you've commanded. So Merchatz Nami, well, why don't we say that when it comes to the bathhouse, maybe the guy is also in some kind of sharecropper arrangement where he's, paying you rent, or paid you some fixed amount and is now going to be taking the profits. So Merchatz Nami Amre Arisa Arisuse Ka'avim. No, Arise de Merchatz lo Avde Inshi. That is a much less frequent occurrence. People don't generally say that you're going to be my sharecropper or my partner with respect to a bathhouse. So that is the first part of the brisa. Now, so that was again, and that brisa was Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. But now we have Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says the following: Lo yaskir adam sadeyu lukuti. He goes to on some level, the other extreme, and he says you can't rent a field to a kuti. Why? Bimnation nikras al shmo, because the field is going to be known by your name. So here he's saying, he's rejecting Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's position and saying that in fact people don't think that it's a sharecropper, but rather it's going to be your name. And he's going to end up doing work in your field on Chol HaMoed, and people will say that it's you that is causing that. Well, 1 second. What's the implication? The implication is that when it comes to a non-Jew, shari, it's permitted. Again, why didn't Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar say that both were prohibited? It must be that when it comes to a non-Jew, it's permitted. And so as a result, and why is it permitted? It's because he says that he's doing it as a sharecropper. Everybody's going to know the non-Jew is a sharecropper. But well, why don't we say with respect to the kuti that he's also working as a sharecropper? So as a result, as we turn to Kafbet Amud Aleph, Arusu say Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Leisling. No, Rabbi Elazar does not agree to the concept of sharecropping, meaning he recognizes that it exists as a concept, but he doesn't say that people will assume it. Rather, people are going to assume that the property belongs to you unless you sell it. When you sell it, everybody knows. But when you just rent it out to somebody, people don't know. And so as a result, when you rent it out, people are going to assume that the person who's working there is working at your request. So Ella Ovikuchav in my time of mutter. Well, then why do we allow the person who's renting the field from you to who's an idol worshiper to be allowed to work to rent the field? Why don't we say that we're worried that he's going to work on Shabbos? Because you can make it a condition of your rental that he should not do work on Shabbos. Because when it comes to field work, for all intents and purposes, the work done today could be done tomorrow. But when it comes, and this is not true, by the way, for a bathhouse, because either if the person might want to take the bath on both today and tomorrow. Wow. So the point is when it comes to a field, though, the work only needs to be done once every season. And so as a result, if you don't do it today, you can still do it tomorrow, or you could have done it yesterday. So the point is that they will listen when you say no doing work on Shabbos. Well, what about a kuti? Why do we say that he won't do that? Kuti nami amrin levitzayis. Why don't we say that he'll also obey? No, kuti lo tzayis. A kuti is not going to obey. Da'amar ana gamirna tfeiminach. I know better than you. Meaning when the kuti is because it's it's sort of like a boss. If you tell your boss about the holiday of Shavuos and they're Jewish, They're like, I never heard of this holiday of Shavuos before. And so they can be more strict. But when you tell somebody who's not Jewish about your holiday of Shavuos, they believe everything you say. So it's, the same kind of thing is true here. A Kuti is going to say, I know more than you about all these holidays and stuff. So don't tell me I can't work on Chol HaMoed. I know that you can work on Chol HaMoed. So ihachi, my irya mibnei shenikras al shmo. Well, 1 second. So, but if that's true, that our actual concern is that he's going to do work on Chol HaMoed, why are we mentioning the fact that people are going to think that it's your field? We should have, it should be prohibited to rent to the Kuti because he's going to end up doing work on your field on Chol HaMoed and violate the prohibition of working on Chol HaMoed. And that's going to be facilitating a prohibition. So, Chadav Od Kamar. Now, the point is that it's two, you're right. The both are applied. And it's the one thing and another. For one reason, you shouldn't rent your field to a kuti because the kuti is going to do work on Chol HaMoed, and you're going to violate Lifnei Iver because he's only going to be able to do the work on Chol HaMoed because you've rented the field to him, and so therefore you'll have violated Lifnei Iver because he's violating the prohibition of working on Chol HaMoed. And moreover, there's also a prohibition because everybody's going to be out there saying that your field, that you must have asked somebody to do work on your field on Chol HaMoed, and that you've violated the prohibition of working on Chol HaMoed. And so
some work is permitted though on Chol HaMoed.
Some work 100%. But not work that doesn't have to be done on Chol HaMoed. And that's the concept that we're raising here. That when we say that we're talking about a field, we're talking about work that could be done today, it could be done tomorrow, it could be done next week. It's okay, within reason of an amount of time, but you don't need to do it this moment. Unlike with respect to the bathhouse. With respect to the bathhouse, we don't make this statement because when it comes to a bathhouse, the work that you do today is only going to bringing different money than the work that you do tomorrow. And so as a result, there would be a loss. So that's a key element. You're absolutely right that we do have this general concept with respect to Chol HaMoed, that when it comes to Davar She'avad, that's something that you're going to lose the money that you would have gained otherwise. And the question is does it also cover potential gain? And in general, I think we say yes, that on some level, that if you had the opportunity, a special opportunity to get some business that you wouldn't have gotten any other time other than this time, so then we allow you to do the work on Chol HaMoed. But here, this work
But
that
it's
we're
not only for money that one would gain. Let's say a store keeper and he needs to supply food to the community. He's opening the store not because he needs the money, but people need milk, they need bread.
100%, 100%. And that's you're absolutely right that there are many ways that you could get to permitting work on Chol HaMoed. But what we're dealing with here is one of the key areas where there isn't that possibility. And so as a result, that's what we're talking about. And so we're dealing with a situation where there is no opportunity to argue that it's a Davar She'avad or something like that, and therefore I should be allowed to do this work. But rather, you could have done the work after Chol HaMoed and after Yontif, and yet you chose to do it during Chol HaMoed, and therefore that's going to be viewed, and everybody's going to know that in fact that work is prohibited. And so
why
as
is the bathhouse that the person doesn't need to take a bath every day? I mean, some people in this, but he could take his bath tomorrow or next week. So why does it have to be open?
No, the idea with a bathhouse is that if in fact the point is that you may be right that somebody is not going to who goes to the bath today doesn't need to go to the bath tomorrow. But remember that if we're dealing with Chol HaMoed, so the point is that you've got Yontif, you got Chol HaMoed, and you got Yontif. So if you don't go to the bath on Chol HaMoed, you're going to have to wait several days, a whole week. And yes, people do go to the bath every week. And so you will have lost that week's bath attendance completely if you don't have your bathhouse open on Chol HaMoed, because the result will be is that Chol HaMoed is the days between the first day of Yontif and the last day of Yontif. We have Chol HaMoed in Pesach. We have the Yontif at the beginning, Yontif at the end, and now we have. So now you have heard of Chol HaMoed. So there you go. So that's the story, Ken. Yeah. So I'll show. It's in the calendar. It's in the Jewish calendar. You have to get a Jewish calendar. So
It's there.
all right. So we are now almost done with the first chapter of Maseches Avodah Zarah. So stay tuned for tomorrow's daf when we finish the first parak and start the second. So Ken, do you still have a question, or does that help clear things up?
Yeah, with this, I was thinking about the discussion lifnei iver velo lifnei iver, but I think we learned a few days ago that there are situations, and I don't have it at the tip of my fingers, where we do we not lifnei iver, but we do hold that someone is responsible secondarily, that we do hold someone responsible, that if we sell and so forth. There was a whole discussion in the Gemara about
correct. And the key is that we don't say lifnei liv de lifnei. We won't say lifnei de lifnei, but in certain circumstances, what might look like lifnei de lifnei can be understood to actually be lifnei. And so as a result, when
we were talking about maybe last week when someone sold to a Jew, we were concerned he might sell to a Gentile, meat that was whatever it was trade for. I remember that.
Correct.
That he actually, or an idol worshiper, he might sell, and therefore the product. And so we were actually, and even though we didn't sell to the Gentile, to the Ovid Kochavim directly, we were concerned that the Jew might, and we put Gedarim so that we wouldn't do that.
Correct. Correct. And what the Rishonim do is try to understand what's the prohibition there that is the lifnei iver. And often what we'll end up saying is that, so for example, you can sell, the question of whether or not you're allowed to sell to a Jew who's known to be selling to a non-Jew.
Right.
And so the issue is a large animal, for example.
Right,
so
exactly.
The issue is that because the sale to the non-Jew is a violation of a prohibition, so your sale to that Jew, even though what we're really worried about, and it is on some level the fact that that we're worried is that the Jew is actually going to rent the animal or is going to have the animal tested, etc. But in the end, we have a prohibition. In the end, the rabbis prohibit the sale of the animal to the non-Jew, and it gets into this very interesting debate as to the degree to which lifnei iver applies to rabbinic prohibitions. And so the point is that the first sale to I think it was Rav Huna who ended up running after the guy that he sold it to, and he wasn't able to catch him, right? So the point is that we end up saying that sale is lifnei iver because the sale by that Jew to the non-Jew is itself a violation. And so as a result, even though on some level that's a gzeira in connection with another violation, but it's still a gzeira, and so as a result, it's a rabbinic prohibition. So that's the story. So the point is that we will say lifnei iver, we'll say things that could look like lifnei de lifnei, but we have to make sure that the geder is such that it's really actually a single lifnei.
Yeah, there's a fine line there.
That's exactly right, 100%. And so, we'll look forward to continuing. A lot of the issues here are definitely fine line kind of issues, and so we'll continue that discussion, God willing, tomorrow again as we finish the first parak of Masechet Avodah Zarah, and look forward to continuing with the second parak, God willing, tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, okay. How's the weather now?
Well, give me a moment and I'll check it for you.
It's cloudy now.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Oh, oh.